This podcast is a project of the Medina Focus with the goal of providing space for collaboration and community among practitioners to the Muslim diaspora in North America. As people around the world have immigrated to the West, many Christians have realized that they live and work in the midst of the nations, and they often feel alone and unprepared to communicate cross-culturally. If you are looking for conversation and community surrounding issues of loving Muslim friends in Jesus' name, we welcome you into the conversation.
Welcome to the podcast. My name is Brian. We're glad that you've joined us to be a part of this first conversation, hopefully the first of many conversations. Nate and I have been leading small meetings. We've been networking and collaborating around the country for some time now. And we notice the same kinds of issues come up across the board as we talk with people. Work-life balance. My church doesn't get it. What risks are we taking? I feel all alone. I'm looking for someone to lead me, and other people are putting me in the seat of leadership to tell them how to do it. And all of these things can really be overwhelming. I know that's what my year one of ministry was like when we focused on reaching Muslims on the Gulf Coast. We were looking for someone to be our mentor and guide, and so many times we got put into the driver's seat, and that just continued. And we didn't know anybody, and we were alone and under-resourced and misunderstood, and sometimes attacked by our own side, and lots of really great fun events that I'm sure many of you have had similar experiences. So we hope to interview a lot of you and hear from you how you manage all of this, how you manage your identity, and how you balance living between all of these different worlds, and what is God teaching you, and what can you share with the group. And so we hope you stick along with us for the ride. This is our very first interview that we are going to do today, and is with a gentleman that we're going to call Brandon. Brandon lives out in California, and he's working with the Guild. He lives down in Little Arabia. So Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about what you were doing down there in Little Arabia.
Yeah, so my wife and 3 girls and I living down here, we moved 6.5 years ago from Oregon to here to, like you said, be a part of the Guild training network. Focuses on training up like a new generation of apostolic workers to go and serve in unreached pioneering context. We're been doing that for, like I said, 6.5 years. We're focused right now on the Little Arabia community. We've formed a team here and now a network of teams that are seeking to catalyze movement from within the community that would bring transformation and blessing to Little Arabia. So we view Little Arabia as a great central hub for the Arab Muslim community. There's about 2,000 to 3,000 Arab Muslims living within a 2-mile radius here. It's the central hub of the county, which has about 20 to 30,000 Arabs living and residing here. So it's a great place to see training, experiential training happen, where people can get hands-on practical experience for, blessing the Muslim world and then preparing for work overseas. So our vision is to see Little Arabia be transformed into a light, to be a launching pad for the nations, and then to be a learning lab where people can come and experiment. So we're right now, in the last 2.5 years, our focus has been, a big part of our focus has been uniting and mobilizing all of God's resources here to bear weight on Little Arabia community. So part of that meaning is there's such a wide variety of different approaches and skills and ministry philosophies and, how to reach Muslims. And the last couple of years, we just really realized, it's going to take a lot more creativity than our little team or my little family has to bring the kind of transformation and movement that we're wanting to see. And
right.
We ain't got it all figured out. So we want to focus on unity and prayer, a big focus to see God, move here in the community. So it's been really encouraging what God's done in the last couple years with uniting workers and mobilizing people to pray and serve the community. There's probably about over 50 individuals in one way or another linked together, like from about 13 or more groups or organizations, all informally networked together, but all in one heart of prayer and seeking God for the community. So that's a long-winded answer, I guess, for what we're doing.
Well, that's good. That's good. So you brought something up, and that kind of leads me to my next question. I think a lot of times in diaspora ministry, this is a relatively new paradigm. It's a relatively new way of doing missions. And I think when we approach other forms of ministry, sometimes there's long established patterns, but we're not really dealing with that in diaspora missions. And so everything to one degree or another is kind of experimental, or I'll call it risky. Mm-hmm. And so let me ask you, what risks are you taking in your ministry?
Yeah, man, one of the kind of just personal risk and challenges I've been facing, or been encouraged by God to be taking more steps of faith and just believing Him for like supernatural. We've realized our strategies and all of our tactics are good and important to learn and know. But we need God's supernatural power. Like His Spirit's the one who brings people to faith, and His Spirit's the one who teaches, and His Spirit's the one who confirms the message, and we got to trust in Him. One of the big verses has been kind of challenging for me personally lately is, in John 14, where Jesus says, "Whoever believes in me will do the works I have been doing, and they will do even greater things than these, because I'm going to the Father. And I will do whatever you ask in my name, so that the Father may be glorified in the Son. You may ask me for anything in my name, and I'll do it." And I'm risking lately and just believing that and praying with people, for people. So even just we're going on prayer walks a little more lately, going out in the street, just asking God what He's up to. And if He has anyone He wants to bless and pray for. So we don't, connect and pray on the streets that much with too many people, but I felt for me, I'm risking okay, you know what? I'm going to at least look for these people. So there's been some encouraging opportunities to be praying with people and seeing God even, heal supernaturally at times, not heal at other times. But I think He's inviting me and us as a group to take more risks than that, go outside of our comfort zone and ask Him to do things that there's no way we could do on our own. So that's kind of risky, especially when we think of what people are going to think of us if we fail or God doesn't pull through, or we look stupid or don't have the right words. So, but yeah, that's one way I've been stretched lately.
So again, with diaspora missiology being a bit of a learning missiology, so to speak, a lot of times people get into a particular project or particular ministry and they think, well, we're going to do thing XYZ. And one of the common themes that I've heard as we've talked with other practitioners is that sometimes God, while they're still headed towards that goal, sometimes God is doing something else. There's kind of an unintended consequence of what they're doing, and they see amazing and beautiful things that God is doing. So what would you say have been some of your unintended consequences that have come from your ministry there?
Yeah, so one of the things we've focused on, the training aspect has been a big part of our work, and trying to provide an environment where we and others can learn by experience in preparation for overseas ministry as well. So seeking to live our lives in a similar way as if we would have to live it overseas. So we intentionally put on some restrictions on ourselves and our, the way we do life and ministry, So one example, we seek to live in a small apostolic team, like that being our primary source of fellowship and accountability. And then we discourage apprentices, especially from being like hyper engaged in their local or traditional church. Not that the local church is bad in any way whatsoever, but because the reality of overseas in many contexts that you don't have a church, or if you do, it's the international church, that being too involved oftentimes, takes you away from the task at hand, what God's called you to make disciples from within the local people. So anyhow, but one of the downfalls of living that way here in some regards, especially for people who are soon to go overseas, the one downside is it's harder to maintain those connections and relationships with your potential sending church. So, and it doesn't make sense for so many people. It doesn't make sense. You're going to live in, you're not going to go to big church on Sundays. You're not going to, come to all of our Bible studies and prayer times and, ministry opportunities and retreats. So it's, it can be a challenge navigating those relationships, but so anyhow, one of the unintended consequences of seeking to live out that small apostolic community here and now, and with de-emphasis on a local, larger congregation, is that tension that happens with people who do want to go overseas. Eventually, it's kind of harder to maintain some of those relationships of the people that will be helping support and send them. So that's, I guess, one of the unintended challenges, I guess, that comes to my mind.
So speaking of challenges, what would you say are the greatest challenges to your ministry there?
Busyness, yes. So everyone is busy. Workers, ministry workers, we get busy. For me, I'm personally, I've been working a full-time job the whole time, except until this last year, March. I just dropped to part-time to be able to focus more on the work here. But still, I get busy. So the follow-through with actually connecting and getting time with our cousin friends, Muslim friends, with people who are wanting to seek, or God does a sweet thing in their life and they're showing interest, and then trying to schedule and find the time with my busy schedule, but even more so their busy schedules too. A lot of these people in this community, we focus more on the, international, the refugees and the immigrant population. So they, a lot of times, they're working multiple jobs or Ubering all day long. And that is, I'd say, one of the biggest challenges.
Can you share one tip for a healthy work-life balance?
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of Sabbath rest. So every week we as a family take one day off and rest, or do something enjoyable. Not try to be productive, just enjoy God's refreshment, whether it's through going on hikes or to the parks or spending time as a family with friends, or just relaxing and reading and listening to scripture or worship. I think that's been a huge, huge thing for our life, to kind of recenter every week, take that time to be together, be with Jesus, and not let the pressures of accomplishing things overwhelm us. So be very, very intentional about resting and then seeking to work from that resting place, So then even Sabbath moments, more and more just being encouraged, Sabbath moments throughout the day, moments of just rest. Even this last week, even at work, okay, my 15-minute break, I'm not going to try to be productive doing something else for stuff outside of my job. I'm going to just enjoy God in this moment of rest while I'm eating or drinking or just sitting there and being mindful of Him. So, yeah, that's one. Sabbath rest would be my encouragement.
So you brought this up in your introduction about navigating between church life and ministry life, and for workers who are going through that, what a challenge that can be of, how do they navigate all these different ties. I think there's other layers we could throw on here of, what does my church know about my identity and what I'm doing versus what do my Muslim friends know. So how do you navigate your identity in those various contexts?
Yeah, so when we moved down here, actually, I got grilled on this like right away before we even moved down. When we were just looking to move here, I stayed the night at a Palestinian friend's house as we were exploring the area. And he had a roommate who was, I think, Lebanese background, but he grew up in the States. And it didn't make sense to him why we were trying to move down here and learn Arabic. I mean, that's how we communicated with him is, we're wanting to move down to live within a different community, to learn a different perspective and culture and language. And we believe that it's going to open up job opportunities and make us better people because of it, giving our girls the experience of living within a different perspective. My degree is in cultural anthropology, and I myself have lived overseas on a homestay in different country and have learned a different language. And I see the value of all of that on just my own personal life and development. So anyhow, it was really good opportunity when he was asking me all these questions, and he's like, so why would you want to do that? And having answers for him that weren't weren't missionary answers. They weren't religious answers, but they were genuine answers to him that could make some sense, and that were true and honest. Mm-hmm. So with our Muslim friends, we've continued like that kind of vein in many ways here in the community. We're seen as, people who have at work and a normal family because of my job. And then I also started a company where we focus on cross-cultural leadership development. Big part of that is homestays. We get Americans living with Arab Muslim host families for a period of time, whether it's like 2 months in the summer intern, like as part of their intercultural studies degree program, then we get them set up with host families. So having that business and being a business owner operator has, been a helpful identity to have as well in the community. And they all know we love Jesus and follow Jesus and focus on Jesus and love to share Jesus stories and love to pray with people too. With our sending church, they sent us in the sense of praying and blessing over us and then help with moving expenses and costs, and they've given here and there. And now, since we've dropped to part-time, they've helped now join monthly partner with us. And then several people around the States are also financial partners of us as well. So even though we have a full-time job, we were taking some ministry expenses, and now even more so with me going part-time. So they obviously see us as missionaries, and we'll use that terminology, even though we tend to not like that terminology and don't use it ourselves because of a lot of the negative connotations and misrepresentations. It doesn't mean what we, want it to mean. So we don't like using that word, but we've come to kind of accept that that's how people think and talk about us. So we just roll with it often, many times. Even some people we work with down here still like to refer to us as that, and sometimes we'll have to correct them. And so, and then like just within our own household here, we love Jesus. We're lovers of Jesus, and we're trying to listen and obey him step by step wherever he takes us and whatever that looks like. So our girls have, referred to us. I've noticed differences now in different cultures and Muslim and Christian. And so they're like wrestling with, okay, well, who are we? What are we? And, in there, we're Christian. I don't know if we've ever told them that we're Christian, like that's like our identity, but that's how they've come to see us, largely because they see the differences in the way we love and follow Jesus and the way other people practice their faith and stuff.
I'm sure that you've been around Muslim ministry circles long enough to know that there's a number of ways of doing Muslim ministry, and there's a number of disagreements between the various camps and practitioners surrounding those different models and methods. How do you navigate these disagreements in your local context?
Yeah, that's been a big thing. When we first moved down, we actually were pretty intentional about being slow to publicly affiliate with different groups that were down here, because there were a couple groups and ministries working, and then different college students coming in and doing things a certain way. So we were pretty slow because we know your public image is so important, especially in an Arab context. Image is almost everything, and who you're associated with. So we've been quick or slow to affiliate, especially publicly with others. But in the last, like I said earlier, in the last 2.5 years, we've made an intentional effort to start connecting more with and uniting people from different perspectives and different ministries in the area. And part of it was, as we've been praying for more and more laborers, and then seeing God answer that prayer and more people coming into the area from different organizations. And we decided, you know what, this would be very helpful to have at least be linked together in prayer for each other, and then in a way that's honoring and to each different perspective. So we're very aware of all the different approaches, and then we view personally, and then within our Little Arabia network now, we view God's creativity is way better than our methods, our individual methods. And God uses so many different ways to bless people and bring people into the kingdom. So even historically, learning from all the different ways God has used people and done things, he kind of shatters all stereotypes. And even when we start thinking we figure it out, we realize, okay, we don't have it figured out. So a verse that has encouraged me too is in 1 Corinthians 12, 4-6, where he says there are different kinds of gifts, but the same Spirit distributes them. There are different kinds of service, but the same Lord. And there are different kinds of working, but in all of them and in everyone, it is the same God at work. And so we try to honor that too. We make a very intentional point of honoring the different ways of doing things, even those ways that are I think they're crazy. I definitely don't want to be associated with those ways publicly, but I want to honor God's servants who are doing things in different ways. So, for example, I take a lot more of a highly contextualized approach, and am definitely okay with the term insider, or even insider approaches to following Jesus. And I know that is way too much of a stretch for a lot of people. Insider, as I've pushed myself to learn more of how people find and follow Jesus and how other workers are doing things from a more contextualized approach. I've been stretched myself, but I realized, man, there's people loving and following Jesus, and God is doing stuff from a lot of different approaches. So I am not very comfortable with the go out on the streets and yell and preach and say how everyone needs to repent and follow Jesus, and your prophet's the wrong prophet and he's and all these negative things. But I know people who are doing that, and they're deeply in love with Jesus, and God's using them to bring people into the kingdom, and it's going to look different. I want to honor them. And so one way we seek to do that too is by just praying together and focusing on prayer. So we've done several network gatherings. We just had one this last weekend where we broadened it up to all kinds of practitioners, no matter what kind of vein you're in, and we're going to seek to pray together and bless each other. So that's been super helpful, actually. It's been uncomfortable and risky, but I feel like we've grown a lot because I have a lot to learn from people who do things differently than I do, and I've got a lot to learn from people who are aligned with me as well. And in the end, I think we all realize every way is a little flawed, and we never have it quite figured out.
Yeah, I think that's a really healthy attitude to have, where we have to choose. We can't be the guy who goes out and does distribution and the guy who does the opposite plan. Sometimes these plans are counter-exclusive in terms of what we can do. But I think I really like your attitude that you have of being excited and celebrating someone else's love of Jesus, and even if their methods are different. So, Brandon, I'd love for you to tell us a story.
Yeah, well, one of the stories that kind of relates to several of these things, it happened a couple years ago now, but with regards to taking steps of faith, and this was kind of towards the beginning of me being more encouraged to take the risks of praying for people and believing God to do the miraculous. So there's a business owner I know that I would hang out quite a bit at his shop, where he would be smoking hookah all day inside of his office and doing his work. And he wasn't ever really too open to Jesus or kingdom stuff. He was, he's Muslim, but he's not like a very practicing. So he's got some pat answers to things that, about Jesus and stuff that his answers are even wrong from what most of the Muslims believe, but stuff that he's heard, So I'd just be friends with him and hang out and see how he's doing and look for opportunities to talk about Jesus and what I'm learning. And but one day I was sharing with him about actually while I was sharing with him, I found out he had been in a car accident, I think it was 4 or 6 years earlier, and he had chronic back pain, lower back pain, that kind of immobilized him in many ways. And I had just prayed for a gal at work, that last 2 weeks ago before that, and God healed her back of a similar thing. And I was like, whoa, that's awesome. And she was just so beaming excited for how God had touched her. And we had been praying for another one of our teammates for a long time, maybe over a year, for his back, because his back was hurting. And then God just suddenly one day healed it. We had a great experience with God, and God healed his back. So I was telling these stories to my friend, we'll call him Muhammad, and Muhammad's like, oh, how interesting. And so then I asked him, well, what do you think? Do you think I could pray for your back in Jesus' name? And and I believe he can heal you. He's like, okay, why not? Sure. So I pray to just ask Jesus to heal him. And afterwards I asked, so how's it feeling? He's like, well, I don't know. It's hard to tell, I'll let you know in the morning because that's when it really hurts. So time goes by. It's maybe a couple weeks later. Actually, we weren't able to connect. I swing back into his office, and he's doing some work, and he's with his cousin, and he looks at me, and his face just starts shining, beaming. He's like, Brandon, the man, you're the man. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, whatever you did, it worked. What did I do? He's like, when you prayed and it worked and my back is all better. It's like, I've been telling my mom, I told my family, everyone, like what happened. And now they want you to pray for them too. My mom wants you to pray for her. I'm like, sweet, sure. So, and then his cousin was listening right there, and he's like, wow, what's going on here? And so I tell him the story. He's like, man, that's really amazing. So, like, do you charge money for this kind of thing? I'm like, no. And he's like, wow, that's admirable. There's not many people like that in this world. So then a couple weeks later, we end up connecting with his mom, and I really I was asking God, like, God, I don't want this to be like some magical thing. Like they have this idea that this is some magic thing and that it's about me. So I had in my mind for her just to read the passage where the woman who had blood for, bleeding for 12 years comes and touches the garment of Jesus, and she's healed immediately. And so I was with the son and her together. We have like a little discovery Bible study time. I just told her to read, just read this story before, and so she's reading it in Arabic with her son, and she keeps going and going and going, and I don't read or understand a whole bunch of Arabic, but I could tell she went a little bit farther than the passage I said. I'm like, oh, you could just go there. She's like, oh, but this is so good. This is amazing. I'm like, okay, cool. So I asked her, like, oh, what's going on? What are you feeling? She's like, oh, I'm like all bubbly inside. This is great. So then we pray over her, and actually God doesn't heal her, but she like has this experience, like emotional experience with God, and even tells me when her son's out of the room, he's like, you know what? I can't tell anybody this, but really I feel more Christian than I do Muslim. Like I love this stuff, and I don't agree with all the Muslim stuff. And anyhow, so those are like super encouraging. But to illustrate kind of this other point of busyness and follow through is, since then, it's been really hard to connect up and meet, and we haven't had any consistency, and there hasn't been any more like eagerness to pursue or seek. He's been way more open anytime I go and talk. Now he actually listens versus just throwing up an argument of what he's been taught about why the Bible's corrupted or, different things. But the discouraging part is it's hard to connect. There hasn't been follow through, and, he obviously hasn't entered the kingdom yet. So while we believe God for miracles, signs, and wonders to confirm his word, we can't trust in that, and we don't trust in that. And even Jesus, probably the majority of the people he healed probably didn't follow him closely after that, or a lot of people weren't like too eager after that. So anyhow, that was an encouraging, thing that God did, and we celebrate that. So that's my story.
That's a great story. So you've been doing ministry long enough, and I think probably each person that we interview and each person listening to this podcast has, kind of that one little gem of something they figured out. With woodworking, woodworkers call this a jig, Jing, jig. And so every woodworker has a little tiny jig, and it just does that one, holds the wood in just a certain way, and they each have their own kind of personalized jigs. So what's one thing that you've discovered that you think other practitioners need to know?
Oh, man, it's super simple, and I think I'm going to be learning this the rest of my life, but just listen to God and listen for God. And don't rely on the strategies and methods. Like for me, we want to be eager, humble, aggressive learners. So we're learning from all the things God's doing through different ministries. We want to learn the different perspectives, learn the different strategies and methods, but we want to be listening for God in all these things and to God as we cultivate that intimacy with Him. Like, just reminded regularly of, in John 15, where Jesus says, I'm the vine and you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you'll bear much fruit, because apart from me, you can do nothing. He's like, if you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. And then this is to my Father's glory. It's so easy to start focusing on all the little tricks and things, strategies and the right presentation of the gospel and the right ways to contextualize, and then we start trying to rely on those things versus listening and abiding and walking with God and taking the time and focus to cultivate that intimacy with Him, so that our lives is an overflow. Everything we're doing is an overflow. And then as we are implementing different strategies, it's really an overflow and a response to God. And it's not just some great way of doing things. So, I continually being reminded of that. and it's a sweet place to be as we hear God, listen to God. That's my simple, back to the basics life hack. Listen to God and listen for God.
Yeah, that's good. So if God could answer one prayer with a yes, what would you ask for?
Oh, that my family and I would be intimately in love with Jesus all the days of our lives, and that our lives would overflow from that intimacy. So, unhindered intimacy with Him every day of our life.
That's a good prayer. Well, Brandon, I want to thank you for coming on the show. I've enjoyed learning from you, and I think others will as well.
All right, thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, that's all we have time for today. We hope that you will join us next time. Also, be looking for the Medina Focus newsletter, and that's when we'll announce the dates of the webinar if you would like to connect with Brandon face-to-face and have a conversation with him.
You've been listening to the Medina Podcast. This show is hosted by Brian Hebert and produced by Nate Schultz. The conversations we have on this program are born out of an expanding environment of collaboration among grassroots ministry practitioners across the North American continent. If you would like to engage on a deeper level, please email us at medinafocus@vision59.com.